Welcome to Beyond the Pages. Join us as we embark on a journey through time and wisdom while we unpack Bible stories together. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pages. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Barbara.
And my name is Debbie.
And we are so excited to be back for another episode. We do want to remind you that for every episode that we release, we also have study guides that go along with each of the characters that we talk about. So you can find that link in the show notes, and that is completely free. You can access that through that link in the show notes. And today we are going to be talking about a story in the Bible, and this is the story of Jesus and the 10 lepers. And this story offers profound insights into gratitude, faith, and the transformative power of encountering Jesus. This story is found in Luke chapter 17, verses 11 to 19, and I'm going to ask Debbie to read.
Okay, Luke 17:11 through 19 says, Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. When he saw them, he said, Go show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? Then he said to him, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well.
All right, so we are talking about a story where Jesus is walking along, right? And all of a sudden, these 10 people come close
Yeah.
to him. What's going on with these 10 people?
They have leprosy. So they have like a sickness, and then they come up to Jesus and they ask, Master, have pity on us.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about leprosy. Back in the times of Jesus, people that had this disease, this was a skin disease, right? And people that had leprosy would suffer so much to the point that their skin would start kind of falling off because this disease would eat at their skin. And so, and it was believed back then that this disease was infectious. That means that that it was contagious, right? That if you came across somebody that had this disease, you would become infected as well.
Yeah.
And so if somebody all of a sudden started to have a rash or some type of skin disorder,
Yeah.
they would have to go to the priest to get examined, right? And if the priest decided or determined that this was a contagious disease and they said, oh, that's leprosy, then the person would be declared ceremonially unclean and they would have to leave the town and move into they call it an encampment where only people that suffered from that same disease lived, right? They couldn't be with their family. They couldn't be in regular society. They were cast out because it was believed that leprosy was contagious. And so they didn't want anything to do with them. In fact, they had to wear a special kind of clothing that identify them as lepers. And many times they also had to wear these bells attached to the bottom of their clothing so that when they came walking, people would hear the
Oh,
bells and they would know leper is coming, so that people would run away.
really?
They couldn't. People were so afraid that if they heard that sound of those bells, people would flee because they didn't want to be contaminated.
Yeah.
So the Bible says that there were these 10 men, right?
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, they hear that Jesus is in town, and maybe they'd heard that Jesus had healed
Yeah.
other people. And what did they say to Jesus?
They said, Jesus, in verse 13, Jesus, Master, have pity on us.
And verse 14 says, when he saw them, he said,
Go, show yourselves to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed.
so in many other instances, we have seen when Jesus comes across somebody that needs to be healed and he'll touch them or he'll
Yeah.
say, um, get up and walk, or he'll, you know, um, there's another story that we're going to cover in the future where this woman touches him, right?
Yeah.
And she's healed. But in this case, what does he say?
He just says, go, show yourselves to the priest.
That's it. That's all he says.
Yeah.
He didn't say, be healed.
Mhm.
Nothing. So what do?
They went, and it's cool because it doesn't say like while they were talking to him they were healed.
Mhm.
It said as like they were walking over, then they were healed.
Yep. And it doesn't say how far they walked before they were cleansed.
Yeah.
It doesn't say that when they were getting closer to where the priests were. No, it just says as they went, they were cleansed. Now, can you picture this, right? Imagine you're one of those lepers
Yeah.
and you've suffered from this disease for many years, maybe,
Mhm.
and you've been an outcast for many years and you haven't seen your
Yeah.
family and you've been treated very poorly. And all of a sudden you hear of this man who does miracles and you have faith, right?
Mhm.
That maybe he can do something for you. And you come out, you see him, he's there, and then you say, please have pity. And all he says is, okay, go show yourself. Why show yourselves to the priest? Because remember, the priest
Yeah.
had to see them to check them and inspect them to make sure that they were still ceremonially unclean or not.
Yeah.
And so they're obedient, right?
Mhm.
Because they didn't
They
fight it.
went.
They went, and all of a sudden they're walking, and then their hands start becoming clean, right? And maybe their nose, and leprosy would attack the nose, would attack the ears, the more sensible
Mhm.
parts. And all of a sudden you realize that your hands and your face and your arms, they start transforming.
Yeah.
What what do you think about that?
I think that's so cool because it's such a hard disease to like go through or to have. So if you suffered, because maybe some of them had just gotten it, um, some of them have had it.
For a while.
Hmm. So, but if you've had it for a while, then you're used to it,
Mhm.
And then I don't know how I would be feeling that new, that cleansed
Mhm.
body
Mhm.
instead of like having with all of those years having
Mhm.
leprosy, then just walking down the street and then you feel new.
Yeah. So what happened with them?
Um, it says in verse 15, one of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. So
So how
maybe
many were there originally?
10.
Okay, okay. All right. So one of them, he doesn't even get to where the priests are.
Yeah,
As soon as he realizes
he turned around.
He turns around, came, and what does he say?
He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. But here's what it says in verse 16, the second half. It says, and he was a Samaritan.
Why is that important?
Because he wasn't like a Jew. He was like, and because if you haven't heard The Good Samaritan, you should go and listen to it. But Jews and Samaritans were enemies. So, first, the Samaritan, he was a Samaritan. He had leprosy, so he had the courage to go to Jesus, and he was the only one, he was a Samaritan, and he was the only one who came back and thanked him. I think that's so cool because he wasn't even one of, like, the same, not kind, but the same, like, he
Yeah, he
wasn't,
wasn't from the same tribe. He
yeah.
wasn't from the same, yeah. And he still came back and thanked
Mm,
Jesus, and pretty sure he knew who Jesus
yeah.
was. Yeah. So I think this is such an important point because it goes to show, I think, two things. Number one, that Jesus really doesn't care who you are, right? In the sense of he doesn't care what your background
Yeah.
is, what your race is. He he healed a Samaritan man,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if he can heal him, he can heal anybody,
Yeah.
right? And it just goes to show that he doesn't he doesn't separate people like sometimes we do, right?
He doesn't judge them
He
by.
doesn't judge them by who they are, their background, their race or nationality.
Yeah.
No. So the Samaritan man came back, threw himself at Jesus' feet, and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Yeah. Um, why do you think that this man went right back and the other nine didn't?
Maybe he, like, realized that he was healed and he wanted to go, like, thank him. But the thing that you should think about is that the other nine, they probably went to go see their family, if they did have family, because they're probably, like, separated for all of those years. Then they're like, hey, look, this is what happened. And maybe they wanted to go to Jesus after, or maybe they wanted to, but they forgot because they got so, like, excited. So maybe they did want to. They just never got around to it, or maybe forgot about it.
What happened after that? What does verse 17 say?
It says, Jesus asked, he says, were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? So maybe obviously he probably knew, but he was like, where are the other 9? Like, didn't they come with you? And he says, has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner? So he says, foreigner. That's another thing that also said he was a Samaritan because they were different. But then he says, because he says, rise and go. Because it says in verse 16, it says, he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. He threw himself, so he was probably on the ground saying, like, thank you. So he says, rise and go, your faith has made you well.
So think about from the beginning, there were these 10 men, right? All of them received healing,
Yeah.
right?
The same healing.
The same healing, all 10 of them. That makes me believe that all of them had faith, right? Because here it says, your faith has made you well. So they all had faith. They'd all heard about Jesus. They all had heard about his miracles, and they all believed that Jesus could do something about their current situation. So they all had faith, right? They were all healed, but only one came back and gave thanks to God. The last verse says, then he said to him, so then Jesus said to him, Rise and go. Your faith has made you well. Remember how it was in another story. Oh, it was in the story of the friends who helped their friend, the paralytic man,
Mhm.
come down through the
Go
roof.
listen to that episode too.
Yes. And in that story, Jesus offered two kinds of healing. Do you remember?
Yeah, he said, is it easier to say to this man, your sins are forgiven, or
Mm-hmm.
get up and walk?
Mm-hmm.
Because he couldn't walk.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so he offered salvation, so spiritually healing and physical.
Mm-hmm.
So here, I feel like for all of them,
Mm-hmm.
he just gave them physical.
They received, because of their faith,
Hmm.
they received physical healing. Right.
But for the one that came back, I think he got both.
Right. I agree with that. And I think that's why it's so important to understand what was the difference. They all were healed anyways. What's the point of going back and
Yeah.
saying thank you anyways? Maybe it was because the physical healing by itself is not enough.
Yeah.
It's great
Hmm.
because now you're not an outcast, because now you can be reunited with your family,
Yeah.
and now you can present yourself to the priest and be declared clean.
Yeah.
But it's not just about that, right? It's also about the spiritual side of it. And that's having faith that Jesus is the Son of God and
Yeah.
that He can forgive our sins. And you're right. I think this one, and even Jesus says this foreigner, right? Like this
Yeah.
one was the one that came back. And you're right. I think maybe he not only received physical healing,
But spiritual too.
but spiritual as well. That's right. Um, so this man um, showed gratitude,
Yeah.
immediate gratitude, right? Because he went back and thanked Jesus. But
Hmm.
not only that, think about it. What Jews and Samaritans, again,
Hmm.
they didn't get along. They weren't seen together. They weren't friends.
Yeah.
Yet this man went back and he did, what did he physically do when he went back?
He like got on his knees and started thanking him.
It says he threw himself.
Yeah.
So he was so touched by what Jesus had done
That he threw himself.
that he didn't care that his friends, Jesus's disciples, anybody that was there was gonna, oh my goodness, this is a Samaritan. What is he?
Yeah.
He didn't care about that at all. All he cared about was going back and thanking
Yeah.
and being grateful to this man who, in essence, saved his life.
Hmm.
Right. And so I think that goes to show that the significance and the importance of us being grateful,
Hmm.
but not only grateful, but recognizing God's power and love in our lives and not being ashamed
Yeah.
to do what?
To like go back and say thank you. To go back and even if maybe it's if your friends are not doing it, or if it's not the first choice you would have chosen, that you should always just go back and acknowledge that God like is the one who healed you. He's the one who gave you life, to you should always go back and thank him.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things that we can take from this story. Number one is God's mercy is for all.
Mm,
It doesn't matter if you're rich or if you're poor, or if you're a woman, or if you're a man, or if you're a child,
mm,
or if you're the right nationality, or this race or that race. It doesn't matter, right? For God, we're all valuable. What
yeah,
matters is that we believe
yeah,
in Him and that we cry out to Him and reach out to Him, right? So God is not just for one specific group of people. He's for those
he's
who
for everybody.
believe in Him, right? So that's one. Um, Another one is Jesus is there for us when we need him and when we cry out to him. Um, Now, I think that we also have to understand that Jesus is there regardless if we are sick or if we are not. And there are times when we might not receive healing,
Mm-hmm.
like this man received immediate healing.
Mm.
There's times when we might not, but does that mean that he's not there?
No.
He's still there,
Yeah.
right? So we have to remember that he's merciful on us, but we have to remember that we can cry out to him. He's there for all of us,
Yeah.
right? Um, Another thing that we have to remember is that if I ask you, can you think of something good that he's done in your life? Would you be able to think of something?
Yeah. I would say like that he's provided.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if we need, he's always been there and he's always provided for us.
And if I were to ask, have you shared about God's goodness and how he's provided for you to someone? Would you be, and you don't have to answer this question, but I think this is a question that we should all ask
Yeah.
ourselves. Has he been good to you? And if we say yes, he has,
Then have you shared it?
have you shared it? Have you been grateful to him? Have you demonstrated your
Have you said thank you yet?
right? And not only that, but have you said it out loud and have you shared it with people?
You don't have to physically throw yourself at Jesus' feet, but have you said thank you? Have you at least told somebody about it?
And why do you think it's important to share with somebody else about what God has done for you?
Because then that impact might help their lives and might maybe not physically heal them, but maybe help, maybe be that you could be that first step to help them if they're not Christian, if they're maybe not in the best mood, or you can just be that step to help them get closer.
Yeah, because I think that the reason why these 10 men came out to find Jesus was because they had heard
Yeah.
about other miracles that Jesus had done before. And maybe they thought, if he's done that with other people, then I have a chance too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why it's important for us to share our story, because then somebody else can say, wait, if God did that for her, then he can do that with me.
Yeah.
If I reach out to him and if I cry out to him. And that's why it's so important to share what he's done, right?
Yeah.
Um Now, another thing that's important to remember is obedience. How does obedience come into play in this story?
Maybe because maybe when Jesus said, go show yourself to the priests, they could have like said, like, I've already gone, I've already showed them. They told me to go here and here and here, but I'm still like this. I still have leprosy. I'm still sick. So they could have just left. They could have gone back to their house, gone to do something. They didn't have to go to the priest. So they did have faith, and they had obedience because they went and they had faith that they would be cleansed.
Yeah, I think that maybe some of them could have been disappointed in Jesus when Jesus said, okay, go show yourselves to the priest. Because maybe they were expecting something different.
Yeah.
Maybe they were expecting a touch from him.
Yeah, maybe they heard of how somebody came down the roof, and he touched them, but they just asked. So maybe they're like, oh, maybe we should have waited. Maybe we should have, because that was all in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
So maybe they were like, wait, what if we did it at the wrong time? So yeah, some of them maybe might have been a little disappointed, but then
Mhm.
once everybody else went, they're like, okay, I guess let me try.
Mhm.
Because they must have been really desperate
Mhm.
because they had been like that for all those years. So they either had real faith or they were desperate.
Yeah, I think you're right. Desperation really plays a part,
Mm,
right? Because it's like we've been living this way for so long.
yeah,
Like this is our last opportunity. And, but even then, I think some of them could have still said, really?
yeah,
That's all we're getting?
but they didn't say anything.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
didn't. They just went. It didn't
They
say.
obeyed.
Yeah,
And that's where obedience comes in. That's where um, they said, okay. And as soon as they left and they started walking, that's when they received healing. What is one thing you want to take away from this story?
I think that you should always remember to say thank you, even if God doesn't give it to you right away. If He tells you, okay, hold on, remember that He's always there, and you've got to be obedient because they went and they were cleansed. Maybe you've taken that step, but you haven't. He's told you to answer that maybe you've done before. And here's another idea for an episode that we could do. Um, when Jesus told them, because they didn't catch anything,
Hmm.
the disciples, and then they threw they threw out their net over and over and over. But then that one time He told them,
Hmm.
maybe you've done the same thing
Hmm.
over and over and you haven't gotten anything, and then that one time Jesus tells you to, maybe maybe you didn't do it because you've done it over and over and over. But maybe you've got to throw that net.
One more time. Yeah. My thing is God is for you. Like he has mercy and he loves us so much. And you're right. It might be that we have asked once and twice and three times and so many times and we're ready to give up. Don't give up.
Yeah,
Like he is for you and he loves you and he hasn't forgotten you.
yeah,
He hasn't forgotten you. And even if you still maybe haven't received that healing or that thing that you're looking for, he's still there. He loves you, and his mercies for you are new every morning. Um, the Bible says, therefore, the Lord waits to be gracious to you. Therefore, he will rise up to show mercy to you. So remember, he's for you, he loves you. And just like he healed these 10 men, and one of them that wasn't even,
yeah,
you know, a Jew, he
yeah,
still healed him. And even he was the one that went back and was grateful and threw himself at his feet. Let's remember that God is for us and his mercies for us are new every single morning.
yeah.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Pages. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends and make sure to hit the subscribe button. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations going because every story is an adventure waiting to be explored.